Hi there. Welcome back to Real Film Chronicles. As always, I'm Nathan.
My name is Brian.
And this is episode 17, wherein we talk about The Mummy, the 1999 version.
Classic. Yes, to be clear, we are not going to be talking about the 2017 Tom Cruise film. Let's stick to not even the original, because this is still a remake of the classic Universal monster movie, The Mummy, right?
Yep.
Have you seen that original? I think it's probably like a 1930s film.
I've seen parts of it, but I haven't seen the whole thing. Honestly, my knowledge of the old Hammer or old Universal and Hammer horror films, I haven't seen all of them. I think the big ones I've seen, like I always loved the Frankenstein myth. The Frankenstein story. So I watched a lot of the Frankensteins. I watched the Wolfman. Recently, I watched The Invisible Man, which was, man, the special effects in that were so much better than I was expecting for the 1930s, right? That blew me away, actually.
It was something else. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The Universal monster movies have been a general blind spot in my film watching habits. I finally did watch The Invisible Man last year as part of like a horror movie project. And I think I ended up watching The Invisible Man Returns right afterwards as well. And I was kind of blown away with the effects in both. They're both good stories, and I should go check out The Mummy and all these other ones. I need to go see The Wolfman. We were talking about Werewolves Within a few weeks ago, and it's just like, I need to go back to the original Wolfman there as well.
This might be my Halloween project this year. Maybe I should go back to all the old Universal films there and just go through some of that filmography. Maybe I'll do...
There was a big box set brought out a number of years ago, and I think it has like 20 some odd films, which has like the entire franchise of all of those characters. And it's like, I look at that box and I haven't seen anything, and I feel shame. But yeah, we're talking about The Mummy 1999, directed by Stephen Sommers, starring none other than Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, Arnold Vosloo, Jonathan Hyde, and Kevin J. O'Connor. Those are like, it's just an incredible cast of characters in this movie. I guess we kind of start at the beginning, like 1999. This movie was released in May. Was it like the beginning of a blockbuster summer, I would think, in May? Do you remember seeing this movie in theaters or anything? Like, when was your first exposure to The Mummy?
Man, I don't recall seeing it in theaters, but I recall watching it like dozens of times.
Yeah.
Because 1999, how old would I have been? I would have been in my late teens. So I don't want to say watching it growing up. Maybe that's not the best way to phrase it. I was already pretty grown up. But like, wow, we got it on, what's that on VHS originally. And like, I threw it on last night to rewatch it. And it's one of those movies that just, it's ingrained in my brain. Like I could close my eyes and literally have this movie play out. It is one of the most perfect summer action blockbusters ever committed to film. Like the story and the special effects and the acting and the directing and the cinematography, just like, it's still like watching that next to something like Jungle Cruise, or something like The Tomorrow War, like modern kind of action adventure kind of films. And you just see the simplicity in the filmmaking. I don't mean to say that in a derogatory way, but everything was just so much more like straightforward in terms of storytelling, but had so much depth behind it still. It was just it's amazing.
The movie it functions on multiple levels. Like, the film makes it look easy, right? It's just like, oh my goodness, there's interesting characters with their own little stories going on and their own adventure. There's a great big overall adventure. There's ancient history in here, in obviously the Mummy and ancient Egypt, the pyramids, tombs, the whole 9 yards. There's just a lot of stuff going on here, and it's intensely fascinating. It's a ton of fun to watch. I don't know. I mean, obviously, we grew up with Indiana Jones and like tomb raiding in that sense, and I feel like this is maybe the closest we got to it. After that, it's just like, for me, I think I was turning 18 in 1999 watching this after watching Indiana Jones my whole life. And it's like, oh, this, I can this is like an update that I can get behind. This
yeah.
captures a magic that I experienced when I was young.
Like The Mummy and the character of Rick O'Connell, I think that was the closest that we've had so far as an heir apparent to that legacy of Indiana Jones, and which goes back to that legacy of, you know, those old 1930s serials that, you know, influenced George Lucas and Steven Spielberg to create Indiana Jones in the first place. And so that's the closest thing I've had, like, with all due respect to Shia LaBeouf and his character Mutt in that fourth Indiana Jones movie. Rick O'Connell was the heir apparent. Brendan Fraser just has this effortless charm, and I think there's been a resurgence recently in appreciating Brendan Fraser's work.
He was a treasure.
Yeah,
he still is.
He still is, absolutely. I don't think that at the time you tend to take for granted when you get something great like that, when you get a great performance or a great actor. And Brendan Fraser wasn't maybe as obviously great, maybe as somebody like Tom Cruise.
Well,
but there was something.
Go through.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I want to go through a few of his movies here, just on Letterboxd, sort of sorted by popularity. And I remember having this discussion with you and a couple others, possibly in the early 2000s, when Brendan Fraser was at the height of his career, is that there was a weird stat in Hollywood where you wouldn't think Fraser's movies were as good as they were, but he was the highest. Now, this is like possibly false, but he had the highest average grossing movies of any movie star at the time. Like The Mummy Returns, George of the Jungle, Journey to the Center of the Earth. All these movies were grossing $300, $400, $500 million. Everything he was in was grossing a lot of cash, and he didn't have a lot of failures in there. He was just, if he was in your movie was almost guaranteed to make $300 or $400 million at the box office. It was quite a time to be a Fraser fan.
Oh yeah, and for sure, I don't think people realized what they had until it was gone, right? Where he was kind of went through a period, and I'm not sure what the background is, but it feels like he kind of dropped out of the limelight a little bit in for at least a decade or so there, right? Or he just wasn't in stuff. I mean, what was the last big one? I remember like that run of films you're talking about, like The Mummy Returns and George of the Jungle, Journey to the Center of the Earth. There was like Bedazzled in there, I think.
So I'm just gonna sort by like release date here. Bedazzled was another one. The Mummy, Dudley Do-Right, Blast from the Past. Bedazzled, Monkey Bone was one. Mummy Returns, of course. There's a Looney Tunes movie he was in, Crash as well, which was fantastic. And sort of later on, you sort of see a little bit of faulting here. Movies I don't recognize, but like Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, Journey to the Center of the Earth. There was a G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra movie in there.
He was in that?
Yeah, I don't know. And we're talking about 2009, where you sort of, for at least me, sort of fell off the radar.
Me too. Also, I know it wasn't recent, but like, am I going crazy, or was Brendan Fraser Encino Man?
Yeah, exactly.
He was the caveman that they thought out in Encino Man, right?
Oh my goodness, what? Yeah, that was one of his earliest roles there. And,
yes.
Yeah, 1992.
It just came back to me thinking about George of the Jungle and him with like the long hair and everything. It was like, no way, it can't be. It was like, it was him.
Yeah, and then also Airheads as well with Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
It's just like, speaking of long hair.
But like, you look at his filmography, and like, for some reason, like there was a humility, I think, to Brendan Fraser in his performances. That he didn't really draw attention to himself as a leading man, even though he could command that presence. But I never thought of him as a leading man. I just thought of him as that dude, right? As Rick O'Connell. He was Rick O'Connell, man. It was just one of those things where like the actor and the character come together. It's like that perfect synergy. And it's like, it was a role that he was born to play. Do we want to go over like the basic plot of The Mummy before we go on? Like,
I mean, we can.
Do you have a plot synopsis queued up for us there?
You want to hear the plot synopsis? Yeah, let's just read it here from Letterboxd.
Every day I want to wake up and hear that plot synopsis read to me, preferably by Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, well, all you get is me for now. Yeah, poor imitation here. Dashing legionnaire Rick O'Connell stumbles upon the hidden ruins of Hamunaptra while in the midst of a battle to claim the area in 1920s Egypt. It has been over 3,000 years since former High Priest Imhotep suffered a fate worse than death as a punishment for a forbidden love, along with a curse that guarantees eternal doom upon the world if he is ever awoken. Oh, fantastic. And that's basically it. It's just like the movie sort of starts out with Rourke O'Connell trying to steal some treasure from a tomb and basically fails. I think the Magi, who are like tasked with protecting Imhotep's tomb for all eternity, sort of turn things on its head. But we fast forward a few years. I don't even know where to go with the plot here, but basically, yeah, Evelyn, also known as Evie throughout the movie, played by Rachel Weisz, and her brother, I think it was John Hannah, is the brother.
Yeah.
They basically
Jonathan.
get us. Yeah, Jonathan. They're just they want to go to Hymenoptera and get this treasure. What are they looking for? Like the Book of the Dead, the Book of the Living, everything.
What happens is, it's revealed later, but Jonathan actually comes across this little box that opens up. It's got a map, and the map is to Hymenoptera, and Hymenoptera is this legendary city. And then, Rachel Weisz goes to her boss. She's a librarian, and she goes to her boss, who's like it's almost like as a librarian is like museum, and so she goes to the curator, her boss, and it's like, oh well, like this map looks legit. Like I've dated this, like it's completely legit. And it's like it's pointing the way to Hymenoptera, and the map accidentally catches on fire when they're looking at it, and so it's like, oh well, like we can't get there now. It's like, well, and then Jonathan reveals, because like Jonathan, so like Evie's like a librarian / scholar, I guess. And I think you get the sense that her brother is also kind of a scholar, maybe an archaeologist, or he's got obviously an educational background because he's reading hieroglyphics later on in the movie too. Like he's not an idiot.
His motivations were always kind of more financial and like a little more
and so he
greedy,
says
like he was after the treasures while she was after the knowledge. The love of the knowledge. Yeah,
because he says he found it on a dig. But it's revealed he picked somebody's pocket at a local, I think it's a local pub or something, or local bar in Egypt. And it turns out to be, he picked the pocket of Rick O'Connell, who's in jail for having a very good time. And they go to him and he's like, can you tell us about the map? And he's like, yeah, well, like I can show you the way to Hymenoptera because I've actually been there. And then, but he's being taken to be hanged. And so he's like, if you can get me out of here, I'll take you to wherever you want to go, lady.
Yeah.
And and so they do all this stuff is that I can't do it justice because there's this certain charm and there's a certain humor to everything that's going on, where like little lines like where he says like I've been to Hymenoptera, right? Rick says I've been to Hymenoptera myself, and Evie says, do you swear? And he says every damn day. And without she's like, it's like, that's not what I meant. It's like, I know what you meant, but it's like just the way, like it could have come off as really cheesy with another actor, or if you try to play too serious or too comedic, but they just balance out roles like that. And it's like really kind of witty back and forth. Right. And it's just, just so great.
The dialogue back and forth is fantastic. Like all the characters seem to be really really well written and have their own interesting quirks. They don't feel like just cutouts.
Even the background characters, like Benny, who is
Benny,
Benny, fantastic. Kind of that dynamic between Benny and Rick. So Benny was with the Legionnaires, Rick and the Legionnaires when they went to take Hymenoptera that first time. It was in 1923, and then the rest of the movie takes place in 1926. But Benny is this kind of like cowardly character who has this like weird, like essentially he's Rick's frenemy. Right?
Yeah.
Essentially, he's Rick's frenemy. Before there was a term for frenemy, because like they have this weird kind of bond where there's like they've been through some stuff together, right? They've been down in the trenches together. But Benny's this really cowardly character, really self-serving character, who's like after fame and glory and riches. But like as soon as there's a big fight that he thinks he can't win, is like he runs the other way. Where like Rick will stand and fight to the end, kind of thing. Rick's got a code of honor, even though he's a treasure hunter as well. But then the warden too, where Evie goes and negotiates Rick's release with this warden. And they do the bargaining back and forth, and there's like, I'll give you 10% of the treasure if you let him go. While Rick's like hanging from a rope being hanged.
Yeah.
And he's going back like 50%.
Intense.
And she's like, 20. He's like 30. It's like, and she's like 30, and he says 25. It's like, and he's like, But the warden is great too, because like he's this kind of comedy relief character, but he's got his own like backstory and his own character going on, right? It gives you a sense that these aren't just characters in a movie. These are real people in a lived-in world going through their lives, and their lives are coming and intersecting with each other, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I keep thinking about the first scene where we were introduced to Evie. She's in the library, and she accidentally, like, she's kind of getting greedy. She's on the top shelf, like she's on a ladder, putting some books away, and she has to put books on the opposite shelf. She's like, okay, well, maybe I can just sort of shift the ladder over here and go over. And she inadvertently knocks over the bookcase. These bookcases are like 20 feet tall. They're huge. And just causes a giant domino effect that goes all the way around the library because they're all evenly spaced apart. Total destruction in this place. Everything is down. It's a funny moment. The boss comes in. You know, he's upset. And the scene works on multiple levels in that we get some exposition on her expertise, like her character. She's not just she's a little clumsy. Fine. But the boss asks her, just like, like, you're awful. Like, why do I keep you around? And she's like, well, you keep me around because I can read hieroglyphics really easily. And I know all this stuff. I know this, this, and this, all of which comes in handy later on. And it's like, gives her a perfect reason. Like, she is on this mission. She's extremely valuable. And then when they find the map, the brother comes in with a map. You said it was an accident, but they burned part of the map.
I didn't want to spoil it.
It turns out this spoiler alert. I love this thing where it's like, well, he is one of these magi that are tasked with protecting the tomb, and he burnt it on purpose. And it's just like, oh, this guy even has multiple levels going on. And it's not like, I don't think he joins the fight later on. Like, this is his station, right? It's just there's a world. Does he join the fight?
He joins the fight later on, and he sacrifices himself so they can get away, escape down the sewer when they're being chased later on.
Oh, that's right. Yes, when they return to the city, yeah. And it's just like, you get a sense like this is a whole network of people who are like fully invested in this legend. And his station is in London, right? Where this stuff is taking place. And there's just people, you get the sense of people all over the world.
Yeah. Listen, there's a secret society in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. There's a secret society that's dedicated to safeguarding the Grail, right? The Holy Grail, to making sure people don't take it and use it for evil purposes. And there's a secret society in the Mummy. Now, there's obvious parallels you can take there. There's even like the secret society members, a lot of them are wearing specific tattoos that mark them as those society members. But there's walking this really fine line between, theft and inspiration, right? And I think that you can clearly see like there's obvious inspiration there from the Indiana Jones movies. But they took it and they made it their own thing. It doesn't feel like it's ripped off from Indiana Jones. It feels like there's a connection of inspiration there, but it feels like fresh enough. And it feels like it makes sense within the context of this movie and the backstory that's being told, that it makes sense here, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that it's paying homage to those earlier adventure movies like Indiana Jones without just direct imitation, right? And like you said, there's such an economy of storytelling where, Evie, obviously she's not, she doesn't have a lot of real world field experience. She knocks over all those shelves in what's probably the most poorly designed library in the world. But it's like, you get the backstory. It's like, yeah, she's, she has this scholarly background. She can read hieroglyphics and hieratic, and she can speak she speak ancient Egyptian. She can organize this library. She knows, like, she's obviously she's in contact with Bembridge scholars. She's trying to get papers published. And then you also find out, it's like, like the reason the curator there, what's the guy's name? Like, he's in so much stuff.
I can't remember it. I
love that actor. But he's also gives this backstory. He's like, the reason I put up with you is because your parents were my patrons, some of my best patrons, God rest their souls. So you find out it's like, oh, they're orphans, right? They're taken in by this. So you got this love-hate relationship. I love like his little, it's just like the writing is like, it's like, no, when Ramses invaded Syria, that was an accident. You're a catastrophe. It's like, I don't care how long it takes. You're going to stay here and straighten out this mishiva. It's like, I could go on quoting this forever, but it's like, even that little side character, he's got so much going on. You think like, oh, he's a clumsy guy who burned the map, and he's like, oh, because he's careless and doesn't care. It's like, no, he's trying to protect he's on this mission to protect the entire world from probably one of the worst curses anybody. First of all, why would you give this curse? Doesn't make any sense, but it makes all kinds of sense. But it's great. But he's trying to save the world, and he comes off as kind of a jerk, kind of a heartless jerk. He's like, oh, he's just trying to stand in their way. It was like, no, he's trying to protect them from themselves. He's trying to protect the world from this terrible evil he knows is lurking out there, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a nice thing. Is like the secret society here they're not evil, and they're not like trying to kill our main characters. Like they're trying to protect our main characters, but also the greater responsibility of the world. It takes some priority, but it's like they're not bad people, and we are able to. The movie fully conveys why we do not want to see the mummy come out of his deep slumber here, or whatever.
Well, to be clear, that secret society does try to kill the main characters, but only because they're encroaching on that place where the Imhotep, the ancient priest, the mummy is buried, and they could potentially release him. So like they're trying to kill them as a last resort, but not. That's right. Like it's not malicious.
It's not malicious. They spend more time like just watching people. It's not like they're in London. It's like, oh, geez, these guys have a map. They got this. We should just assassinate them in the streets. And no, they're going to follow them like all the way there just to see if they can make it to the hidden city and then come take more action.
I like that. It was like, we're going to use violence as a last resort, but it's like, no, like they found the map. It's like, well, I'll burn the map and hopefully they're just going to, forget about it and go back. It's like, no, we're going to, like they're going there. It's like, we're going to follow them to see what's going on. It's like, it's only once they actually get to Hamunaptra that they're like, well, we got to stop them by any means necessary, because if they unleash that evil, the entire world is essentially going to end.
And so, I mean, moving the plot forward here, this is where the adventure begins, right? We've got Rick, we've got Evie, we got Jonathan, and the warden, who is going to get a percentage of the treasure, insists on going with them. So there's a quartet of them going. They're on the riverboat, sort of like the first leg of their journey, where we are reintroduced to Benny. And he is partnered up with an American team of adventurers who are also after the treasure of Hamunaptra. And of course, disaster strikes. I think they do try and kill.
Well, the secret society shows up. They set the boat on fire, but I think most everybody gets off.
Everyone gets off.
They were there specifically to get the map and the little box the map came in, which turns out to be the actual key that they need to open various things.
But I love that scene because the boat is sinking, the all abandoned ship. Rick and his crew are on one side of the river. Benny and his are on the other side. And Benny is like trying to taunt Rick. It's just like,
hey, O'Connell. Yeah. Hey, O'Connell. Looks like we've got all the horses. And that retort, it's like, I love that. It's like, hey, Benny, looks like you're on the wrong side of the river. And then Benny just takes a moment and he's like, he looks around and he's like, ah. It's like, oh, there's such great little beats like that, right? It's like, the action is great, and there's little moments like where Rick's being shot at, like Rick and Evie are behind this barrier, and you see the bullets coming through closer and closer to Rick, and Evie just like pulls him over a bit, and like a bullet like explodes right where his head used to be, and he just gives a little look, and then he goes back and starts shooting at the bad guys again. But it's like little like touches like that, and it's like the relationship between the characters. You get a sense of, okay, there's an American team, and they're going there, and you just get like these little, and you meet them at a poker game, and they're not super antagonistic. The hired guns that they have with them. I was like, let's make a friendly bet, like $500 to see which group gets to Hamunaptra first. And it's like, but just like all these little character beats that are fleshing out these background characters as well, and it's just, I love those little, it's perfectly paced, right? There was just enough time for the characters to breathe, and then you get this awesome action set piece that's still memorable, right? You can close your eyes, you can see the whole thing. Then that one guy with like the blade in his hand, it's like he's got like presumably he's got like a prosthetic, and he's like clips that blade in, and that one little thug, he's got like a whole arc as he goes through and gets like burned alive.
So brutal. I mean, the deaths that do happen are pretty gnarly, aren't they? Like, would you say this is a bit of a family film? Like, you're going to show your kids this movie?
Oh, I've showed my kids already. Yeah. But this is the thing. It's very kind of PG-13 violence but it's weird though. Like you see like when like the mummy and stuff, and he's pretty gory when he's first resurrected, and
he's very slimy. Yeah.
Or as they say in the movie, juicy.
Juicy, yes, exactly.
There's several instances where like multiple characters will say the same word at once. It's a really kind of corny, cheesy thing, but it works. It works so well. It's just weird things. But yeah, it's like there's some really gory scenes where when people are getting eaten alive by these flesh-eating bugs.
Yeah.
And they come away and it's like, yeah, and it's like there's just this gory kind of skeleton. But it's not like over the top. I felt real comfortable. I think I watched this when I watched it with my kids when they were, I want to say like maybe 9 and 11, maybe, or 9, or maybe 8 and 10. But they weren't like old. Like, I felt super comfortable watching this with little kids, right? Like they weren't going to get nightmares or anything from it.
I feel like, 10 years later when they've grown up a bit and then rewatch this film or start thinking about it, it's like, oh, the way these characters are dying is really horrific. Like the guy, the warden, is trying to cut these jewels out of this, out of the wall. And turns out these jewels contain these bugs that I guess are immortal, these little beetles. And they come to life and like burrow into your skin, and you see the little bump that goes up his body. It's just like, oh my goodness, he starts slapping himself trying to get this thing out, and it basically goes into his head and he just falls down dead. It's really horrific. It's like, what a horrible way to go.
That's not the worst part though. He doesn't die at that part. How he actually dies is this thing burrows into his brain. He's screaming, right? He falls, he collapses, but he gets back up and he's screaming. And like Rick and Evie and Jonathan, they're actually like, digging somewhere looking for I think it was the book of the what was it called? It wasn't the Book of the Dead. They find the Book of the Dead, even though they're looking for...
There's a different book. There's the Book of Amun-Ra.
But the Book of Amun-Ra. So it's not the Book of Life, it's the Book of Amun-Ra. That's what they thought was there. But they're digging looking for this hugely valuable artifact. They hear this screaming, and the warden guy, after this insect burrows into his brain, he comes running down this corridor, runs right past them, and he like runs head first in this wall and bounces back, and he's dead because he like crushes his skull against the wall. And just like you hear like just like this sound effect, not super over the top, super crazy, but it's like that sound effect really sells it. And like the actor who did that, or there's the actor or the stunt person who did that, and they hit that wall head on. It's the way they fell back and just like stopped dead. And it's like such a brutal thing where you crush your own skull against the wall to try and stop that pain. I'm assuming because it looked really painful, right?
And then we have other characters like the American team. They have employed like a group of locals, I'm guessing, and they have them sort of open up these different areas, and like some of them are booby trapped, and they have like they're basically, I can't remember what he calls it. It's like salt acid, exactly. Thank you. And it's just like that comes jetting out of one of these traps. And there's like just two of them that are just being burned alive with this acid. And we don't see that much, but as an adult, I can understand. It's just like what is happening is like, that is really horrific.
Yeah. Those guys are never heard from again, but presumably they didn't last too much longer.
No. And it doesn't take long. I think they do discover the Book of the Dead. I think the Americans discover the Book of the Dead.
Book of the Dead, and then the 4 canopic jars that the mummy's organs are in.
And I think Evie steals the Book of the Dead while everybody's sleeping. Like she just basically wants to go read the Book of the Dead. Like she was after the knowledge, right?
Because she doesn't believe in curses and everything, right? So like,
exactly.
I think Rick and some of the others are like, because Rick's been there. And Rick has seen some stuff like at the beginning of the movie where he saw that face appear out of the sand. It's like, there's some weird stuff going on here. So like Evie and Rick and Jonathan find Imhotep's mummified body, and it's still, after 3,000 years, it's still decomposing and it's still wet. Yeah. And then like the Americans find it's still juicy. The Americans find the Book of the Dead in those 4 canopic jars with his organs, which is important, right? Because there's a curse on the box that all this stuff's found. And it's like, if you take this, you're going to unleash this plague and you're going to be cursed to die or whatever it was. But yeah, Evie steals the book from him and she starts reading out of it out loud, just out of a sense of like, scientific kind of curiosity, right? She doesn't think that she's going to raise the dead. That's ridiculous nonsense, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what she does. She raises the mummy from the dead.
Yeah, she does.
And he starts, on his tear, and in his decomposed state, he has to get all of his organs back. Including one, like his eyes. This one stands out to me the most here because he steals one of the American treasure hunter's eyes from him, leaving him alive.
And tongue.
His tongue as well. That's right. So he's taken that. Not only does he take that, and then there's general chaos. They all return to London, right? And there's this scene a little later on where the mummy is like, well, we got to go over there because we need something. And instead of going after other people to get like the other stuff. It's like, no, he just goes after the same guy again and like steals his skin and all his other organs and stuff. It's just like, man, this guy was doomed. It's just like, he can't just be a blind guy of no tongue out in the world anymore. No, he is definitely dead. He's dehydrated, his stuff. The mummy is able to regenerate mostly off this one poor guy.
Well, it's kind of neat too how it works out where the mummy, yeah, it's kind of a neat thing where you wouldn't think about that, but it's like, in order for the mummy to talk, which he does, he needs a tongue in his head. And so like there's a certain kind of internal logic that the filmmakers obviously thought of where they're like, oh, well, he's going to need a tongue and eyes to see. And it's neat how like those like kind of logistics play into the plot where he's like, okay, I need to regenerate, but first things first, like, so this mummy is essentially stumbling around blind first, where it's like, for some kind of supernatural sense, it's like, I need to see and I need to talk. So this was my first priorities. And I think, I don't know why he doesn't just kill him. Cause like later on when he drains the other people, cause there are 4 people involved in opening that chest, and he essentially whoever's around that chest when it's open. So if you got like 100 people there when it's opened, I guess he has to go through 100 different people. His life force is like split up 100 different ways, I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
According to the logic of the movie. But anyway, there's 4 guys. Later on, he drains them pretty quickly, but this guy, for some reason, he just rips out his eyes and tongue to start off with. It's almost like I get the sense like he's woken up after 3,000 years and he's like disoriented and he's trying to figure out what's going on because he sees Rachel Weisz's character, Evie, and he's like Anck-su-namun, which was his lover, who was the pharaoh's wife that he was having a love affair with, which started his whole, path down to being cursed for all eternity. But he's like, it seems like almost like he's disoriented. So it almost feels like, even when he's this evil kind of monster character, but you get a sense of, he's slowly like kind of reintegrating into this world and like trying to figure out like what's going on, right? It's like your consciousness came back into your, decaying, rotting corpse for the first time in 3,000 years. And you're just like, man, I just want some eyeballs to see, man. First of all, it's like, I didn't just see what's going on around here, man.
And can we talk about how good the CGI is at this point? This is 1999. The mummy is, for the most part, all CGI at this point. Like, he's in his decomposed state. You can see through parts of his body, the animation in his face. Everything about it is pretty incredible. Like, it really holds up to this day, right?
Yeah. Listen, you can definitely see the edges for sure. It's a movie made in 1999, so there's definitely some edges to see, and it's not perfect by any means. But you're right. It holds up so well compared to a movie like from a couple years ago. I'm struggling to think of an example because there's tons of examples where the CGI just doesn't hold up these days.
It can be amazing, but there's also like you can tell when they're rushed and don't have the budget, and it just looks awful the day of release.
Yeah, compared to, here's a good example: the end of Black Panther, that video game cutscene fight at the end between Black Panther and Killmonger. To use another example, Jungle Cruise, which just came out. If you look at the CGI to that compared to like The Mummy, and like I just don't think those movies are just going to hold up as well as The Mummy has. Where you see of course, the edges around it, but like it's blended. Like for 1999, you think about like how far the technology's come, and like it looks better than 90% of the stuff that's put out today. Over 20 years later.
So what happens next? There's 10 plagues, right?
Oh yeah, then it starts going because like the whole thing is like the mummy is bringing the 10 plagues of Egypt, and it's so great when Jonathan, when some of these plagues are happening, and he's quoting from the Bible, what these plagues are, this ominous voice, and you have this like because he's like the comic relief kind of side character, but he gets these kind of like serious beats every once in a while, but like it's super creepy, like the locusts come first, and then there's like another one where there's bugs coming. There's like fire falling down from the sky. There's like a solar eclipse, and he's just like ominously narrating this stuff. The water turning to blood while they're drinking.
Yeah, it's like, that was pretty gnarly. Yeah, they're just trying to enjoy a nice drink at the place. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
What is it?
And they basically surmise that Imhotep is the mummy, and he wants to resurrect his forbidden lover, right?
He wants to two things. He wants to resurrect Anck-su-namun, his lover, and he also wants to take over the world as one will.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, I think his priority is definitely the lover at this point, and I think he needs to sacrifice someone in order to do that, and he chooses Evie as that sacrifice. So while they're all in London, it's like she's basically snatched up by Imhotep. and Benny, because Benny is now working for Emotep.
Yeah,
right?
There's
in a great scene where Benny has all this religious like necklaces from like all religions.
It's perfect
around his neck, and he's going through each one trying to like appeal to the mummy to spare his life.
Because first he pulls out a cross, and he just starts like saying like the Lord's Prayer, and you just think, I was like, oh, this is just like a standard thing. Like, okay, of course he's gonna be slimy and weaselly, but his sliminess and his weaselness goes far deeper, because he pulls out, like you said,
like he's pretty clever.
He's got all these different religious symbols, like the Buddhism, I think like Taoism, and then finally Judaism, and he starts like praying to the God of the Old Testament, God of Abraham, and like it's kind of a neat little tie-in. It was like, oh, and like Imhotep's like, oh, the language of the slaves, like he might be useful.
Yeah. So he's working for Emotep now and doing some of his bidding. It's really fantastic. There's a lot of good moments, and they basically make their way back to Hymenoptera to do that ritual, to sacrifice Evie, resurrect his lady friend, and I mean, they all have to return back to Hymenoptera and basically save the day, right? To the climax of the film, which just has all sorts of levels of fantasticness.
It's great. So again, like talking about how all these characters have backstories, even that pilot, right? The old RAF pilot, where he's like pining for the glory days, and he's so sad that his friends kind of died in a blaze of glory, and he's kind of just wasting away. And obviously he has a pre-existing relationship with O'Connell. It's like, oh, we're gonna fly back out there to catch up with them, and he's like, oh well, what does this have to do with with Her Majesty's Royal Air Force? It's like, not a damn thing. It's like, but
there's glory involved.
There's glory. Is there a chance of death? It's like, oh yeah, you're probably not coming back from this. And he's like, let's do it. But it's like there's like humor to it, but there's also like that kind of sadness to this old guy who's essentially lost all of his comrades and his friends in the war, and he does find his peace. He ends up when the plane crashes. Another great bit of CGI that still looks really good, where Imhotep creates this giant sandstorm, and it's chasing down the plane, and he's got this like his face appearing in the sandstorm and everything, and it causes the plane to crash. And that old RAF pilot, he dies, and he finds, it's not a sad thing, where he's finding peace, right? You saw he was very kind of
exactly
in trouble, but they didn't have to do that, right? They didn't have to put all these little beats into the backstory of this character that we see for maybe 3 scenes, but it adds so much.
And I just want to point out, like there's a sword fight scene here where now Emotep, his power is much more significant than it was when he first risen up. And he's able to sort of like bring these guards back to life, like these mummified dudes who are pretty hardcore, and they walk in unison, and Rick has to fight them with a sword. Just excellent bit of choreography. The action, it is one continuous scene here where he's swinging the sword around. All these things are CG, but he's able to interact with them, and it's like, I think we probably watched the same episode of that YouTube show where they talk about special effects.
Corridor Crew? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like these mummies are hand animated around Brendan Fraser's acting, and it's done so well. And it's like there's comic gags in the fighting as well, while he's cutting their heads off and batting them out of the screen. But there's still a lot of risk involved, because it's like, oh, this is some real danger, and they seem to have weight in the scene. Like it's
amazing.
Really
if you look compelling. At that Corridor Crew breakdown of that scene, it's literally Brendan Fraser just swinging his sword through the air at imaginary. It's not people in green suits like that you have today, or like those jumpsuits with the tracking balls. They didn't have the technology at the time to do that stuff. So it's literally just like, oh, we're gonna choreograph this fight, right? And it's like, oh, we're gonna have this bad guy here, this bad guy here, and this bad guy here. And you look at the level of acting you have to do to make that believable. Well, you're just having a fight with imaginary people all around you, memorizing these moves and in this space. And then like the final product looks amazing when they like, part of it's like the CG, and they put these characters in there and they're interacting with Rick in amazing ways. But for it to be believable, like Brendan Fraser had to sell that. And oh my goodness, like he sells that so well. You would never have known. I thought for sure that there were actual people there that got painted out afterwards.
And I love that it's like the entire thing, it looks like it's not that it looks like a set. You can tell it's a real set. Like there's not, everything is CGI. Like there's There's like a platform in the middle of this fighting arena.
Yeah.
You know, and today you would find out that that was just a green block that they replaced the CGI. It's like, no, they actually crafted a lot of these sets to make it look real. Like these things look like stone. Everything looks so good on screen here.
Yeah, it's great, that whole fight. And like you said, like just the cinematography where it's not a million little cuts where you can follow the action. Like there's several scenes where it's held for like several seconds. Like it's not like there's still like scenes aren't actually, if you look at movies, they're not held for super long time, but you're looking like 5 or 10 seconds at a go or something crazy like that. But you can really follow the action. And there's like these little kind of comedic beats where he cuts up, for example, at one point he's like kind of pinned to the ground and there's one mummy coming with like holding this giant stone obelisk and he's going to crush him. And he finally gets his sword, as like there's a dismembered mummy hand crawling over to the sword that he can't quite reach. And once the mummy hand grabs the sword, he reaches over, grabs that mummy hand, cuts the legs off the other guy, and the mummy falls back and the stone crushes the mummy instead of Brendan Fraser.
There's like a look on the mummy's face while that's happening. He's like, oh man, I am cooked. But that whole scene reminded me of The Evil Dead. Yeah. Just have that coming. It's like the disembodied hand like crawling towards the sword on the ground. It's like this hand is intent on using the sword to kill Rick. And then it's just like quickly turned around to kill one of his buddies there.
A couple homage shots to Evil Dead in here as well, which is really, considering that, you know, The Mummy was originally based on a horror film. The Mummy 1999 is more of like an action adventure film with horror elements. But like you see that one shot when they first released The Mummy and they escape from Hymenoptera and the hand shoots up out of the ground, the mummy's hand.
Yes.
It's a direct homage to the shot from Evil Dead. And then this like, this, of course, anytime I see a disembodied hand crawling across the ground trying to kill somebody, that's got to go back to Evil Dead too. So there's definitely, I think there's some of that either consciously or unconsciously, that homage being paid to those horror films as well, right? So many, like you said, so many different layers going on. It's a fun action comedy adventure film, but with just all these kind of different layers going on underneath it, just to add that substance and to really draw you into that world, right?
And I really enjoyed the finale. Like obviously they're going to defeat the mummy. They send him back to the underworld there and whatnot. During all this whole thing, all the fighting and whatnot, Benny is trying to loot the treasure because there's a room full of gold, and he's going in and out of the tomb, loading up treasure, and he accidentally sets off like this trap that basically causes the entire structure to like slowly come down on him, right? Of course, our heroes are able to get through. Benny, in his greed, is just weighed down by all this gold, and by the time he sheds it, it's too late for him. He's sort of sealed inside this tomb, and of course, those classic beetles come out of the ground, and it goes dark. But we just hear screams. And what's nice about that is that our heroes are rewarded with one of the bags of gold that he looted earlier, right? Because he was loading up the camels outside, while our heroes are the only one who survive. So they come out, they're riding home, and just like in one of the shots, you see like the glint of gold out of the saddlebags. It's like the heroes, Rick and Evie, they may not even know that gold is there.
And they don't know
it doesn't matter. It's just like they got that reward, but they also save themselves. They save the world. They're good to go, and it's a very satisfying ending.
It's great too because Evie at one point tells Benny, it's like like little conniving people like you always get their comeuppance. Yeah, and I love that it's like, and I love that it's like played as like Benny. Like normally it's like, oh yeah, no, you're gonna get your comeuppance. It's like Benny's like, what? Wait, really? We do? He's like, yeah, they do. And he's like, it actually troubles him. It's like a little comedic moment played there. But like what you're saying about Benny's death, right? Where, because what they had a series of mirrors. I was like, it was really neat. It's like, they thought of this. It's like inside of this tomb would be, of course it's going to be dark. There's no lights down there. They wouldn't have electrical lights back in the 1920s to take down there, or electrical lights that were portable enough. So like, no, it's like, well, this had this one throwaway line. It's like, no, these ancient trick with these mirrors. We'd have a series of mirrors and like one on top of the hole, like there'd be like a hole opening down. You'd have this to light up the whole thing. Is like, it's just like this one little in-universe thing is like, that's why it's bright inside here. That's why we can see what's going on. But like as the entire city of Hymenoptera is like collapsing in on itself, like this one easily flickable, like protruding switch that anybody could have just like leaned on at any time.
Yeah, not the best trap. The collapse of everything.
Very like movie logic-esque, but the movie, the mirrors get crushed and he's standing alone, and the only light he has is from his torch, right? It's where kind of Indiana Jones-esque, where like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they're down in that pit and the snakes are around them and they just have the torch warding off the snakes, but like all those like beetles are crawling around him, and he's like it's just the light holding the back, and the torch goes out. All you hear is the scream. And there's a couple scenes in the movie like this where you just hear a scream, or like when that first guy before he got his eyes and his tongue ripped out, that first American guy, you don't see the mummy, right? It goes to an extreme close-up on his face.
Yeah.
And as actor, you see like his face change. You see the horror in his face come over him, and you see him like slowly turn, like, and then it cuts away as he's screaming. And like those, to me, more than like the kind of gory bits of when people are getting, you see like the flesh torn off their bones, but like Benny's scream, or that dude's face of pure horror, and then the scream as it cuts away, to me, like those are like the really kind of horrifying moments.
Oh, without a doubt.
Where your brain really kind of takes over and fills in those blanks. And it's just such a smart choice.
Yeah, like they want your imagination to run wild, because either constraints with the scene or just like saving money, your imagination can do a much better job than what they can throw up on screen to like truly terrify you. And I think in like a PG-13 movie like this, it's more effective. Like we don't need to see a gory scene to get the point across. Just show the reaction shot. We can fill in the blank. It's just like seeing the monster. We don't necessarily need to see the monster do his thing here, right?
Yeah.
Incredible.
But overall, I mean, just in terms of like the actors, like these actors were all perfectly cast in their roles. Include, like we talked about Brendan Fraser, I think, being perfect as like the kind of dashing rogue treasure hunting, hero of the story. Rachel Weisz was perfect. I love that, she wasn't a fighter, that she brought something else to the table, that not everybody was like, even Jonathan, he wasn't like the best fighter there, but he was bringing something to the table anyway, right? He was in the final battle, even Jonathan had something to do, right? Like comes out, was like, he's reading this passage from the book of Amun-Ra, I think. And it's like, oh yeah, of course. Like he's got this educational background. He's like, he can read hieroglyphics too, just like Rachel Weisz. So it's almost like you see like that sibling dynamic where like they both have the same kind of background of education, but he just hasn't applied himself, kind of thing.
Yeah. Like he's trying to he's getting stuck on one of the hieroglyphics in the book, and he's trying to describe it, and like his arm is moving up and down. He's trying to describe because Evie is across the room and she's yelling out like, this is what it should say. It's like, oh yeah.
Right. A manifest. But yeah, like those characters are perfectly written. They're perfectly cast. Like Arnold Vosloo, I think we got to give a shout out as Imhotep as well. And then I can't remember the actor's name for Anck-su-namun. She doesn't have a whole lot of screen time in this, but you get so much between their relationship. Like you believe that these are kind of star-crossed lovers, right? Like
yeah. So that was like the entire prologue to the movie was kind of that initial setup, right? Taking place in ancient Egypt. It was like 2500 BC or something.
Also, I gotta say, like as a teenage boy, like Anck-su-namun was definitely a movie crush of mine growing up. I mean,
well, I was just reading the trivia, and the number one trivia from IMDb, take it with a grain of salt. It says, with the exception of a loincloth, a few pieces of jewelry, and pasties, Patricia Velasquez, as the actress, her costume consists entirely of body paint, which took 4 hours to apply. So, I mean, obviously being 17, 18 years old, that was a nice treat on top of the rest of the film.
I definitely had a celebrity crush on her for a bit there, for sure. I'm not gonna lie, but like all the actors were perfectly cast. Like it was so well written. Like the pacing, like written, directed, and edited. I think it all comes together, right? It was like the pacing was just bang on. All those character beats just landed so well. Yeah. The cinematography, like you're saying, is like, you see the action scenes are exciting, but they're so clear. You could follow everything that's going on. There's little character beats where you're like, even in the action scenes, you're revealing little things about the characters. It's just everything about this movie is just off the charts.
Do you even have a rating for this movie? Like, obviously, like, to give you some context, on Letterboxd, this has a 3.4 rating, which, I thought it was going to be higher than that, like an average rating.
Yeah.
But I had difficulty rating this recently. Like, I try and put something on every movie I watch. I did not put a rating on this one. I just gave it the heart. I don't know if it's nostalgia and just my love for everything about this, but it's like, is this a 5-star film for me, or is it a 4-star with a heart on it? You know, right?
This is easily for me a 5-star film with the heart.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking letterbox ratings here for those of you who don't understand what the heart thing is, but you can go, you know, it's a 5-star rating, plus you can actually like the film, and it's represented by a heart icon.
Yeah.
But I gave it 5 and a heart because, like, every time I go back to this, and maybe it's nostalgia, but it takes me back to my childhood. But every time I watch it, it still holds up so well, and I feel drawn into the adventure, right? I'm going on the adventure with these characters. All the pieces just fit perfectly into place. It's not a movie that's going to challenge me philosophically, but it's not meant to, right? It's meant to be this escapist fantasy adventure, and it succeeds perfectly in this, right? And that's why, you know, it sets this goal for itself, and it actually hits that goal, but it exceeds that goal as well. Every time I just I have a big smile plastered on my face watching this movie. Jokes that I've seen 100 times, I'm still laughing at them. They're still landing. These character beats is just like something. They've captured something true to life in the interactions with these characters, even though they're kind of caricatures. It's almost like a live action cartoon. It feels like sometimes, right? Like you could see an animated version of The Mummy, right?
And we've talked about this more in the past few months doing this podcast, but it's like, I am really, like, as I get older, really appreciating even simple depth to characters. And I think we talked about it with Jungle Cruise. And this one is just every character on screen, they have speaking lines, they have a backstory, there's these little mini arcs going on, there's satisfying things happening with all the characters here. It's just, I don't know how else to articulate it. It's a beloved film. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, everything was here. Stephen Sommers, like at his prime, directing this thing
and writing it.
Yeah, which is surprising because, like, The Mummy Returns did not hold up. I watched that. I did a double feature last night, The Mummy and The Mummy Returns back to back.
Yeah, so I guess that's the important thing to note here. I mean, this movie, just before we move on, a huge financial success. Wikipedia here is telling me that they had a budget of $80 million. It had a box office of $416 million. Obviously a smash hit for the studio.
Wow.
And they like rushed a sequel to this movie. This Mummy came out in 1999. The Mummy Returns came out in 2001. A very quick turnaround time. And it's literally like May 2001. So probably less than a year and a half of production and post-production, whatnot.
It shows.
Absolutely bananas. Like, it was really, we won't get fully into The Mummy Returns, but it was a pretty big disappointment, right? It's not near the quality, even though it is also written and directed by Stephen Sommers. It stars pretty much all the same characters, and an actor that we did not talk about for the first one, who is like the kind of like the de facto leader of the Magi. Oded Fair.
That guy's awesome.
Fantastic, and had a greatly expanded role. Patricia Velasquez from the first one, greatly expanded role here as well.
Oh yeah.
It's like, it's, when you look at it on paper, like everything about The Mummy Returns should have worked, and it just fell short. It was strange. It was kind of a strange film.
For perspective, I gave The Mummy 5 stars, and The Heart, Mummy Returns, I think I gave that 2.5 stars, which is like a huge drop off. It's like, it just goes to show you how difficult it is maybe to get it right and to catch that lightning in the bottle. I'm not saying that it's impossible to catch that lightning in the bottle again, because if you look at, for me, like the Indiana Jones trilogy, the original trilogy, for me, those are all hits, right? Those are all like, somehow they were able to recapture that magic. 3 times.
It's funny because while I was watching it and like near the end of the film, I was like, this is literally half the film of the original Mummy. And you just quantify right there. 5 stars down to 2.5. I actually do have a rating on my letterbox of The Mummy Returns, and I gave it 2.5 stars as well. It's just, great minds think alike here, right? But I did rewatch it last night as well, and it's like, I can see a bit of the brilliance shining through a bit, but it was really quashed down with a lot of like way too much ambition and reliance on CGI, where the CGI really worked in the first one. They tried to get too grand in the second one. There was a lot of bad things happening in the second one, essentially. I don't want to fully get into it, but
yeah, but you get to see, it's interesting to contrast between The Mummy and then The Mummy Returns and then The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, which was the third movie in the series. There's actually, I think there's like 7 or 8 movies total in that universe because the Scorpion King had a bunch of movies. There was the spinoff there.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, that's important to note here. The Mummy Returns introduced the Scorpion King, The Rock specifically as the Scorpion King. I think it might have been one of his first feature films.
It was, yeah.
And the very next year, 2001 was Mummy Returns. 2002 was the Scorpion King. I guess it was successful enough. It's just like they really wanted to push this guy out there. I don't really remember the quality, but again, it says story by Stephen Sommers, screenplay by Stephen Sommers, directed by Chuck Russell. It did not do nearly as well as any of the Mummy movies, financially at least. But it is there. Now, have you seen the third Mummy, the Tomb of the Dragon Emperor?
Not only have I seen it, I actually own it.
Oh, very nice. And I have not seen it. I started watching it last night in a double feature. An hour in, I was just way too tired. I could not continue. The movie was not gripping enough.
It just, again, it lacks that magic. One of the things that's gone is like Rachel Weisz is replaced by, I think, Maria Bello, I think is her name. That's right. She's a great actor. I love watching her work, but interaction between
they don't have the same chemistry. Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz had this good chemistry. Their characters were good. You don't get that same thing in this one.
Yeah, with Maria Bello, I don't get the same level of vulnerability as I got with Rachel Weisz. I was like, Rachel Weisz, I could buy her being in danger. Maria Bello just seemed too confident, which is not a bad thing, but it's like it just didn't fit the character. I don't know.
Which is fair. And then the whole series just kind of petered out at that point. Even though the third one made just over $400 million, I think the budget was probably, quite a bit higher. I think there was like an animated series. There were probably numerous video games on the thing, but the whole Mummy series just kind of came to an end in 2008 with the third one. And then kind of rebooted in 2017 as an attempt to relaunch like a shared MonsterVerse with Tom Cruise and The Mummy in 2017. I think I already said that, but critically panned, audiences hate it. The only good thing I will say about The Mummy in 2017 was this bananas, 0G in the plane action scene, which, is only exciting to watch because Tom Cruise is actually up there doing some of his own stunts and whatnot. Quite the spectacle, but like so far removed from The Mummy that I grew up with. Yeah, it just bears no comparison.
Yeah, The Mummy 2017, I don't think I hated it as much as a lot of people did. I thought it was a perfectly fine summer blockbuster, but it was definitely nowhere near. It was hindered a lot by the concept at the time where they were literally building out a cinematic universe because Marvel was so successful and Universal was like, oh, we're just going to build out our MonsterVerse and it's going to be super easy. Barely an inconvenience, but but that led to some really weird narrative choices that just really held the movie back. I mean, it was fine, but it was like, it's not going to have the same magic, I don't think, in 20 years that The Mummy has, the 1999 version has.
Man, so you mentioned there were numerous Scorpion King movies. I had no idea. I'm looking at the Wikipedia article I can't remember whether there was say this.
There was 4 or 5, right?
Direct-to-video prequel, Scorpion King 2, Rise of a Warrior, 2008, Scorpion King 3, Battle for Redemption in 2012, Scorpion King 4, Quest for Power in 2015, Michael Biehn and Rutger Hauer were in that, and finally a 5th film, Scorpion King, Book of Souls in 2018, and apparently a plan to reboot the Scorpion King film series in November 2020. I had no idea the Scorpion King kept going. Like it is still like it is for this It's basically an active franchise.
Yeah, man. The Scorpion King had 5 films compared to The Mummy's 3. So
yeah,
take that for what it is. Take that for what you will. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. And The Rock wasn't in any other movies except for that very first one.
Yeah.
Which, wow, incredible.
Yeah.
Man.
It certainly is something.
Well, do you have anything else to say about The Mummy or the Mummy franchise in general?
Yeah, The Mummy, I think the first Mummy, the 1999 version, the Brendan Fraser verse Mummy.
Yes.
I mean, that is stone cold classic. I think that, it's proven to stand the test of time. It captured the imaginations of audiences back then. I think it's finding a resurgence and an appreciation now. When people look at modern blockbusters and they look back at movies like The Mummy or movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, which came out 4 years later, big action adventure set pieces. And I think there's a newfound appreciation for the directness, maybe the simplicity of the storytelling, the effectiveness of the special effects, and the depth of the characters, right? There's something that was kind of special. There's a spark maybe that I'm not saying it can't be recaptured or recreated, but it's not being captured or recreated with modern blockbusters. I think there's a new appreciation for some of those films. And I think the Mummy really is going to stand the test of time in another 20 years. In ways that a lot of other blockbusters at that time aren't, and a lot of blockbusters in the last 20 years are not going to be on that list either. I think it's a great movie for any age. I loved sharing that, being able to share that with my family and my kids now, and hopefully pass that love and that adventure and that excitement on. But like The Mummy it's a great film. If you haven't seen it, go out and find it either streaming online or, buy a Blu-ray copy. If you have seen it, go out and see it again, because every time you watch it, it's one of those movies. It just keeps getting better and better every time you watch it.
It really does. I'm really happy to hear, spending some time on social media, a new generation discovering Brendan Fraser at his peak and discovering The Mummy. This movie does deserve it. I think you said it right there. Like this will live on for quite a while. This is not a modern day blockbuster that is quickly forgotten. This one is still in the hearts of people who experienced it back then and the new generation. Just really fantastic.
A new generation rises.
It is, oddly enough, one of the first 4K films I picked up a few years ago when I got into 4K. So it's kind of a shameful admission here, but it came with the entire trilogy, and I still have not seen the third movie in its entirety, even though it's been sitting on my shelf for 2 years.
An interesting stat for listeners: it was also one of the first films you bought on HD DVD.
Yes,
I know this because I'm sitting here looking at the copy that you bought that I acquired from you, and I still have that HD DVD copy sitting here on my shelf.
Oh my goodness!
I'm pointing out to the side, but even Brian can't see it, and audiences definitely can't see it because it's a podcast. But it is here within arm's reach.
That's pretty incredible. You know what? I totally forgot that I bought it on HD DVD. This would have been one of the earlier DVDs I bought, probably in 2000, 2001. And I probably bought it on Blu-ray as well. It's just one of those movies that's just like, almost subconsciously, I'm going to rebuy every single time it comes out.
It's a classic like Back to the Future or Indiana Jones or Die Hard, where like every time they come out, I'm going to be one of the first ones in line. I'm a sucker for that. I want to see it in the highest possible quality, and I want to give my money to these people. Like this is the stuff that I want more of.
What a great ride that is. Fantastic.
Yeah, this should be taught in film class. You want to make a good Hollywood blockbuster, action adventure period piece, you study Indiana Jones, you study The Mummy, right?
And that's a wrap on another episode of the Real Film Chronicles. Thank you so much for listening and hanging out with us today. We're having a great time putting these together and love sharing these episodes with you. We can be found on a few platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and Letterboxd, all of which are linked in the show notes. You can also reach us by email, and of course, you can find our website at realfilmchronicles.com. Until next time, take care of yourselves and others, and keep that film journey going.